I tried to address a few of the arguments that come up as soon as you start advocating for South African-style tactics to be used in the Palestinian context. But I do want to address a couple more of them. One of them is this idea that this tactic will do more harm than good because it will alienate otherwise supportive Israelis. And that what we should be doing is being more constructive. Now, I don't think I need to spend too much time on that in Ramallah because people have been very, very constructive here for many, many years. But one point that I would just like to stress that I made in that piece is that this idea of constructive engagement as opposed to a BDS strategy, what we see in the past 3 years is that as Israeli violence has really escalated dramatically, thinking about the attacks in Lebanon in 2006, the most recent assault on Gaza, what we see is that in this period, not only hasn't Israel faced any kind of reprisal from its trading partners, but actually trade relations have been deepened. When the attack on Gaza began, what you really saw was, I think, the cost of what happens when you truly have a feeling of impunity, total impunity on the part of the Israeli state. They started that criminal act knowing that they would not face economic sanctions. And in fact, they were quite right. In the first 7 days of wartime trading, so while Gaza is being pounded, the first 7 days of trading on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, the flagship index actually went up by 10.7%. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. Usually when states go into a war, they see their stocks plummet. But the opposite actually happened. Another objection that we hear to BDS is, Israel is not South Africa. Now this is sort of a silly objection as far as I'm concerned, because nobody's ever claimed that there's an absolute equivalency. But the reason why the United Nations codified what an apartheid state was in international law is because it understood that it was going to look different in any context. So the question is not, is Israel the same as South Africa? It is, do Israel's actions meet the international definition of what apartheid is? And if you look at those conditions, which includes the transfer of people, which includes multiple tiers of law, official state segregation, then you see that yes, it does meet that definition, which is different than saying it is South Africa. No two states are the same, but that's not the question. That's a distraction. The real reason, and I think what we really can learn from the South African example, is that when you have a relatively small trade-dependent state, this is a tactic that can actually work. And I'm not going to be spending a lot of time, or I won't be spending time here today talking about the material in my book. I have a chapter on Israel and Palestine as a kind of a laboratory for the homeland security sector. But I do want to talk about that just in the context of economic pressure. Because what I argue in the shock doctrine is that part of the reason why there is so little interest in peace within Israel is we've got two reasons. One, the fact that it is possible to live a relatively normal, fun life in Israel. And the other is that Israeli companies are not feeling the pinch from war. And if you look at many different conflict zones, whether it's Ireland, whether it's Sri Lanka, when a society ultimately gets tired of war, it's because people say, I just want to live a normal life. I just want to live a normal life. And also because the business sector starts to put pressure on the government so that they can engage in normal trading. And because it is so very difficult to have a thriving economy in the context of war. You can have a thriving military economy, but a broader economy is very difficult to have in a conflict situation. Both of those issues are challenged by the explosion of the homeland security sector in Israel, which is of course intimately connected with the infrastructure of apartheid in the occupied territories, because these are the technologies, the surveillance cameras, the walls, that allow the biometric identification, all of it, which is all run by private companies. This, on the one hand, allows Israelis to live that so-called normal life, even as the conflict rages, even as the occupation continues, even as peace and justice are denied. You can still have that bubble of normalcy, and in addition to that, you have a very large sector of the Israeli economy that is profiting directly from the homeland security sector. Not just in Israel, but because Israel is being treated like a live laboratory, okay? Because the occupied territories are really the laboratory and Palestinian people are the test market, okay, for these technologies, then that means that they can be exported. And they are being exported. And we see this, very dramatically with the fact that the Israeli companies that have built the wall, the apartheid wall here, are going and selling their expertise to the US government. They call it the virtual fence. It's also a $2 billion project being built between the US and Mexico, and also the US and Canada. And it's a whole network of sensors and guard towers and electrified fences and so on. The $2 billion contract went to Boeing, but the main subcontractor was Elbit, which is one of the two main Israeli companies building the wall here. So it isn't just about the economy here in Israel, it's about saying, we know how to do this. Look at what a safe, normal bubble we have managed to create, surrounded by a sea of enemies. Now in this context, peace is a threat. Because if these companies can't claim that they are protecting Israelis from an endless, irrational enemy that they can never talk to, but yet they're still able to keep Israelis relatively safe, then actually they lose their market, okay? So one of the things that we're doing here with BDS is we're creating another pressure in the Israeli economy that actually does want peace. We're challenging, one, the idea of normalization, because when a film you really want to see isn't going to play the Jerusalem Film Festival, when a conference you wanted to go to isn't going to happen in Tel Aviv because people have decided that they're not going to have it there, that challenges such a central part of Israeli identity. But on the other hand, you're going to have more and more companies that are going to go to Israel, and this is what the Israeli government, this is what happened in the South African context, and they're going to say what the South African businesses said in the 80s, finally in the late 80s, look, you've got to make this stop. That's what they said to the de Klerk government. We can't take it anymore. We can't take this boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign. It's starting to hurt our bottom line. So there's already a huge part of the Israeli economy that's saying the opposite. It's actually saying we don't want peace. We want status quo. We want security, not peace. There has to be another section of the Israeli economy that says no. We need peace. We need peace to have a normal life. Everybody deserves that. I don't think it's brave that I supported the BDS call in 2008 when Gaza was being attacked and children were dying. The call was made in 2005. I'm ashamed that it took me this long. I'm not being humble when I say that I'm sorry, that it was nothing but cowardice. It was nothing but cowardice. But I ask all of you out there who are on the fence to please join me.